Welcome to Growing Up, a podcast about children and young people. These podcasts were written and produced in association with the Living Assessments Project and funded by the Wellcome Trust.
This is the Spotlight series. I am Monique, your host from the University of Kent, and in this series my guests share their childhood memories from the UK and elsewhere in the world, from World War II to the 21st century, all true life stories, all unique reflections of their era. In this episode, we'll meet Sue, whose childhood in Australia started like a dream childhood. But then a tragedy occurred, which changed everything, from her parents' personalities to Sue's emotional health. Hello, Sue, and welcome.
Thanks, Monique. I'm Sue. I now live in Ramsgate in East Kent, but I was born and brought up in Sydney, Australia. I'm 69. I was born in 1952, so my childhood was in the 50s and the 60s, and I came to the UK in 1979, just for 3 years, and I've been here pretty much ever since.
What was your family like, your direct household?
Yeah, my mum and dad, of course, and I had a brother. And then there was me. We had a cat and a dog, of course, but yeah, just a small family.
And what was it like where you lived?
It was in Sydney, but Sydney's was then and still is, to be honest, a very suburban place. So I grew up in a place called Belmore, and there were nice houses, but just fairly plain houses all up and down the street. I used to play with the boys across the road, and I had a good friend, and my friend Christine, who I've known since I was 2. She lived in the next suburb, and she and I went to school together. But my mum and her mum used to play tennis together on a Thursday, and so that's when Christine and I used to play together. And but yeah, it was a good childhood in lots of ways. The one of the things that happened that wasn't great was my brother died when I was 8 and he was 11, and that did have a really major impact on my parents, of course, but also on me and our wider family as well. So that was things changed a lot after that.
That is a tragic event. Sue, are you able to tell us a bit more about it? Was it expected? What happened?
No, it wasn't expected. My brother got a form of pneumonia for which there was no antidote at the time. Of course, since then, this was 1960, since then they have developed an antidote for it, but he was taken to hospital and died the next day. And unfortunately, my parents were not allowed to go in to see him because he was having fits, and they felt that the medics thought that they shouldn't see him. So one of the things I think that really made my mother very angry for the rest of her life was that she was not able to see my brother when he was dying and be with him. And I can understand that. I remember my parents meeting me after school, which was a pretty unusual event. And I remember, chatting away to them and saying, "How's Jim, my brother?" And they said, "Oh, well, let's wait till we get home." And then, of course, they told me. I didn't really understand what being dead meant. And I remember asking an uncle, because I was told that my brother had gone to heaven, and I remember asking an uncle, what's heaven like? And he said to me, I don't know, love, I've never been there. Which I must admit, I thought, oh, okay, that's a reasonable answer. But it was just, it wasn't, and at the time, because of the 1960, the view was that children should not go to a funeral. So I never went to my brother's funeral. And I did spend the day with my friend Christine, that I've mentioned, that I knew when I was 2. And so it was all a bit strange, because I from the day he went into hospital, I never saw him again. And I do think I felt somehow, I ended up thinking somehow that it was my fault, because he'd been in bed and he'd had kind of like a cold or bronchitis, and my mother had roused on me and him because he was sitting up in bed and he should have had something around his shoulders. And so I think I then thought, I maybe caused him to get the pneumonia, which of course wasn't true. And I didn't ever say that to my parents, so they weren't able to say to me, no, that's not correct. And I think it took me years and years to understand that, because these things that you take on as a child are very powerful, really powerful. So it was hard. It was hard.
That would have been extremely hard. I wonder, then you say this tragedy had a huge impact on the family. Could you see at the time the impact? Did you realize that things had changed? And in particular, did your parents or maybe your mother's behavior changed for a long time?
Yes, she was. I think the overwhelming sense I had was she was so angry, and she would get out into the garden till late at night, digging and planting and working in the garden, I think partly to work off some of the grief. But she was devastated. My father, as is typical, I think, of men of that generation, stayed at work longer and drank a lot, so that didn't help. That didn't make things any easier. I tried to be as good as I could be to try to help Mum, but I learnt very quickly not to talk about my brother. And my grandmother, who I loved a lot, said to me, "Oh, the good die young." And, I do know, I thought, what does that mean about me? But at the same time, of course, I think we all ended up seeing my brother in this rosy glow of he became sort of almost like Saint Jim. But again, my grandmother was the only person really who talked to me about my brother, and she was a really important influence. She let me, I went to stay with her in her flat, and she used to, she made the habits for nuns in the convent, and so she was making those, and I was just playing alongside, and it was that's one of my really good memories, is of just pottering around, playing with things while Nana sort of made nuns' habits. So that was good. She was lovely. She used to take me to the convent, and some of the nuns were really. They were nice. They were kind of very caring, I think. So that was a good thing. My mum had had 3 sisters and a brother. She didn't see the brother very much, but she saw a lot of her sisters, and so I had cousins to play with, and they were the main people I think I ended up playing with. And they'd come over to my house, or I'd go over to their house. But I don't think, certainly as I grew up, I didn't have people from school, for instance, over to my place, mainly because of my father's drinking, and you couldn't tell what sort of mood he'd be in or what sort of state he'd be in. So it was safer not to ask people over. I mean, I loved him enormously, but I was very protective and very defensive of him and my mum, because mum could just be, because of mum's anger, was just easier to keep people away, I think, rather than bring them over to my place. So, yeah.
Did that situation continue into your teenage years?
Yes, very much so. That particularly is the time that I'm talking about. And people had very strange reactions to the fact that my brother died. For instance, I mentioned I played with the boys who lived across the road. Well, there was another family of boys who lived next door, and we'd played with them. But from the time my brother died, they never spoke to me again. Whereas the other boys, of course, were good friends, and let me be the teacher in the school and tell them, and played cricket with me and things like that. So some of them were good, but then there were other people who had very strange reactions. I think as I got into my teenage years, I learnt not to speak about my brother very much at all. So I honestly don't know how many of my friends knew about Jim, but I was very conscious of what I felt as the oddness of my family, because it was, I think I in some ways, of course, it was normal. It was my family, and I that's what I was used to. But in other ways, I knew it wasn't quite the way other people's families were.
And coming back to the impact, but looking at more day-to-day attitudes that your parents may have had, in particular, I'm thinking of your mother. Did she still somehow remain motivated to keep you happy, or keep a family life together all these years?
Yes, she did try. I know she relied on me a lot and used to talk to me about things that perhaps she shouldn't have, like my father's drinking. But we did go to the theatre and did go to the cinema. I asked if I could learn to play the piano. I don't know why I did, but Mum and Dad agreed that I could have a piano, And I got that, and I had lessons, and I loved it, and I still love it. It's still one of the things that I do that I love. And so that was good. They wanted me to do well at school, and I did, to be honest. And again, I remember I got 96 in a maths exam, and my mother said to me, "So what happened to the other 4?" And I think in some ways she was joking, but of course I didn't see it like that. I kind of felt that, oh, crumbs, I didn't get 100. And so I did work very hard, and I found a lot of solace in schoolwork and doing well and pleasing my parents, because they were pleased that I did well. So we did, and we did have the odd holiday, not many holidays, but we did go on holidays sometimes. So yeah, life was kind of normal.
In that case, I hope you can find in your memory what would have been the happiest time. It doesn't have to be a precise event, but as you remember it, when were you happiest? And it could have been before the age of 8.
Yes, I think the memory that I do have is before the age of 8. I must have been, I suppose, about 4 or 5, and I've still got photos of it. My mum and 2 of my aunts and my grandmother and all the children went to a place called Wiseman's Ferry, which there's a river and nice gum trees and area to play in. And I think it was my brother's birthday, and we had ice cream cake, and it was amazing because it came out of the box, and I didn't know at the time, but this, what seemed like steam rose out of the box, and so we all played together. I was with my cousins and my brother, and we had a lot of fun. And ice cream cake. So that was one of my favourite memories.
Well, that's going to be difficult to beat. I wonder now, thinking back and looking at your life and the person you've become, how much can you feel the influence of your past and how this has made you the person you are?
Yes, I can feel the impact of my, my past. I would say it took me a long time to come to terms with my brother's death, and just to, in a sense, get over it. But one of the things I've realised since, and which has been a source of comfort in a way, is that you never get over these things. All you can do is become accustomed and accept that sometimes things like this happen to people, and of course they happen to a lot of people, not just me. But it is hard to come to terms with, and I think it took me a long time to do that. But as I say, I have found some comfort in the idea that actually, even at my age, I miss my brother. I would love to have a brother. We played together. He was great. He was a good source of, in a way, protection. He'd say to me, I'll ask Mum and you ask Dad, when we were going to do things. And so, it was the two of us kind of against the world. And when he died, I felt really alone. And I think that kind of quality, although I've had, some lovely friends, that quality of there's something missing, and there's been something missing for a long time, but I've I do acknowledge that he now, and I kind of talk to him in my head. That sounds probably strange. You probably think I'm a bit loopy, but I do still think about him and remember him, even though the memory is faded and so long ago. I have to say, lots of therapy to help me deal with that and various other events that happened in my life later, and I think that helped me to come to terms and come to a sense of myself and looking forward, not looking backward. I think I spent a long time looking back, going over the past and sort of trying to dig around in it, if you like, and whereas now I want to look forward, even and I know people say, well, at your age, but actually I still want to enjoy my life and make the most of what I can of it.
I wonder finally if you would have any advice for your 10-year-old self.
Well, I would say to me, it wasn't your fault. You loved him and he loved you, and try and talk to him, or maybe draw some pictures of him or write something about him, so that you can mourn him yourself. But it wasn't your fault, and it's a sad thing that happened for your parents and for you, but these things do happen. I think that's what I'd say.
Thank you very much, Sue. I've lost for words. It's been wonderful listening to you. I hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, follow us on Twitter at living_assess. To find out more, search online for the Living Assessments Project.